নমস্কার, শুভ সন্ধ্যা। রাষ্ট্রবিজ্ঞান চর্চা কেন্দ্রের আজকের আলোচনায় সবাইকে স্বাগত। আজকের আলোচনার বিষয় জ্যোতিবা ফুলে, কোয়েস্ট ফর এগালিটারিয়ান রিলিজিয়ান। আজকের এই আলোচনার চেয়ারপারসন ডক্টর প্রদীপ বাসু, ফর্মার প্রফেসর, ডিপার্টমেন্ট অফ পলিটিক্যাল সায়েন্স, এক্স ডিন অফ আর্টস, প্রেসিডেন্সি ইউনিভার্সিটি। আজকের আমাদের এই আলোচনার মুখ্য আলোচক ডক্টর মধুরা দামলে, অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট প্রফেসর, ডিপার্টমেন্ট অফ পলিটিক্যাল সায়েন্স, প্রেসিডেন্সি ইউনিভার্সিটি। আমি রাষ্ট্রবিজ্ঞান চর্চা কেন্দ্রের পক্ষ থেকে ম্যামকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি আমাদের এই প্ল্যাটফর্মে আসার জন্য। আমি স্যারকে বলবো আজকের এই অনুষ্ঠানটি পরিচালনা করার জন্য। ধন্যবাদ।
Every time I come here, first of all, I thank Rashtrobigyan Chorcha Kendro. They have taken a great initiative for helping the poor students throughout West Bengal in urban and rural areas. And also they conduct a series of seminars, conferences, and they have recently crossed 300 seminars. And most of these were conducted in Bangla. That is a novel initiative, but many times they have also arranged in English. I thank them for inviting me to chair this session. Today's topic is Jotirao Phule, Quest for Egalitarian Religion. Today's program will be conducted in English. Our honorable guest is Professor Dr. Madhura Damle. She is a very young scholar. She is the assistant professor of political science in Presidency University, Kolkata, and also a guest lecturer in the Department of Linguistics, University of Calcutta. She worked on language, culture, and politics in India, intellectual history. She is also interested in caste and gender studies, research methodology, and apart from these, she is a renowned dancer. She is an expert in Kuchipudi dance. She has done her MA, then MPhil, and then PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Her PhD was on language politics in colonial India. She has published also several research papers. Then a personal note, I know Madhura for quite some time. Even before she joined Presidency University, she contributed one article for my edited volume. And Madhura was my colleague in the department in Presidency University. She is a remarkably intelligent lady, very intelligent. Her memory is very strong. And I am grateful that although she has taken up many other responsibilities, still she has agreed to deliver a lecture in our platform. Now we are going to talk about Jotirao Phule. He was a great reformer. He was born in 1827, 7 years after our Bengal's Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who was born in 1820. And he died, Jotirao Phule died in 1890. And throughout his life, he experienced the agony of belonging to a Shudra, that is a lower caste in Indian caste system. And he was given English education by missionary schools and teachers, and at the age of 21 he read Thomas Paine's Right of Man. He was very much inspired, and he understood that women and so-called lower caste people must be emancipated through education. He worked for women's emancipation. He set up his first school along with his wife, the famous Savitri Rao Phule, and they conducted in 1848 the first girls' school in India. And he worked also in several ways. Today we will know from Dr. Madhura Damle about his opinion of egalitarian religion. So I now request Dr. Madhura Damle to please start.
Thank you, Professor Pradip Basu. At the beginning of this session, I wasn't able to hear what he was saying, but as soon as he called me honorable and something else also, now I'm able to, like, all the technical faults have been resolved, and now I'm able to hear you, thankfully. Uh, so, PB sir or Professor Basu has already given a like brief background of what I'm going to speak. As he mentioned, Jotirao Phule was a social reformer, rather, I would say a social revolutionist, or as Gail Ombed say, he led or like he was a leader of a cultural revolt in Western India. So, as PB said, Phule was born in Western India, what is today called as Maharashtra, in 1827. Uh, Though we can compare this particular context to the context in Eastern India, or specifically in Bengal, there is some difference, because by this time Bengal had already come under colonial rule, and a particular culture had already started developing in Bengal. On the other hand, in Western India in 1827, it was just the beginning of the colonial rule. The Peshwa rulers, who were the prime ministers of Maratha rulers, were like they were de facto rulers of Western India, and the power was transferred from them to the British rulers in 1818. So we all of us know about Shivaji, but Shivaji's descendants did not rule themselves. They were the uh, let's say, like, they were obviously in the seat of power, they were the rulers, but all the power, actual power, lied with the Peshwas. The term Peshwa in Persian means prime minister. So this was not supposed to be a hereditary post. These were the prime ministers to Maratha rulers, but gradually it became a hereditary post. And so a particular family, a Brahmin family, occupied this post in Western India, and they ruled not only a like small part of Western India where they had direct rule, but their dominance or hegemony was spread to many other regions in India. They claimed that they had reached Atak, which is the uh, which is now in Afghanistan, to Katak in Odisha. Of course, they did not establish their rule in these parts, but they had certain hegemony, or they had certain chieftains, like in Indore, in Baroda. Like in these cities or in these regions, they had certain chieftains who were representing them. So, since these Peshwa rulers had become de facto rulers of Western India, uh, the Brahminical supremacy in this region had reached its height. Caste system is not something unique to Maharashtra or Western India. Obviously, it existed in all parts of India. In all parts of India, Brahmins were superior. However, we see a peculiar thing happening here, and that is concentration of all sorts of power in one family and thereby one particular subcaste. So Brahmins were obviously at the top of the caste hierarchy. So socially and religiously, they possessed power. But at this particular point of time, because of Peshwa rule, this particular subcaste of Brahmins also possessed political power and along with that also economic power. So many of them were money lenders. And it is in this context that we have to situate Phule. 1818, the power is transferred from Peshwas to the British. There were several battles at the end of which the Peshwas were defeated by the British. So when Phule was born, it was just the beginning of British rule in India, the colonial modernity which unfolded in Bengal, for example, at that time, which yet to be unfolded in Western India at this point of time. However, Christian missionaries had started working much before that. In Ahmednagar, for example, there was an American mission which was already established and had started working. It had several educational institutions which also inspired Phule. In 1873, Jotirao Phule, along with his associates, established Satya Shodhak Samaj, the Society for Truth Seekers, let's say. Now, again, establishment of socio-religious organization, it's not something unique to this region. There were several other organizations. There was Brahmo Samaj in East India. There was in Western India also around same time, several other organizations were established. Prarthana Samaj was, Samaj, for example, was very similar in ideology to Brahmo Samaj and had connections also. There was one representative of Brahmo Samaj who stayed in Maharashtra for 6 months to assist the functions of Prarthana Samaj. So, establishment of these kind of socio-religious organizations and quest for alternative or new religious structures, new religions, uh, new interpretations of religions was seen everywhere. However, my argument in today's talk is going to be that there is something very unique that we find in Phule's establishment of this Satya Shodhak Samaj and his interpretation and presentation of alternative religious traditions, and that his religion is more social rather than ritualistic. And by social, I mean lot of things. By social, I mean it is public, it is civic, so it is for all. It is egalitarian. It is based on reason or rationality, and it is. I mean, this is something that I want to talk about today. So this was just to give an overall background. Uh, we know that in the same region in Western India or today's Maharashtra, B.R. Ambedkar laid another anti-caste movement, which is known as, sometimes we call it as Dalit movement, sometimes it's called as Ambedkarite movement. So both of these movements launched an attack on Brahminism, on hierarchical social order in the caste system. Both of these movements laid an emphasis on education. For both Phule and Ambedkar, in both these movements, liberation was envisioned through education. At the same time, both of these movements also gave importance to establishment of social justice through some kind of alternative religious practices. As Gail Ambedkar has pointed out in her work Buddhism in India, for both Phule and Ambedkar, and I quote, finding a true religion was a major part of the freeing of the masses from the yoke of Brahminical slavery. I unquote. Ambedkar also mentions in her work that last works of both of these thinkers were on the theme of religion. Sarvajanik Satyadharma Pustak by Phule and Buddha and his Dhamma by Ambedkar. These works attempted to formulate religious alternatives in their quest for social justice. Uh, Before I start talking about this particular theme in Phule's thought, let me give an overall idea about Phule's thought in general. We all know that Phule was a critique of Brahminism. While Ambedkar used the term Hinduism and considered caste system as an intrinsic feature of Hinduism, surprisingly, Phule never uses the term Hinduism or Hindu in his works. The term that he is using or what he is criticizing is Brahminism. And he never uses the term Hindu or Hinduism when he is talking about caste system. Phule criticized Brahminism for several reasons. He criticized Brahmins uh, who were occupying important posts in three fields: colonial administration, education, and religious domain. So, according to him, uh, the Brahmin school teachers were very partial, and they were not ready to teach uh, not just Sanskrit, but anything to Dalit or lower caste students. And so it was very important for him to have representations of non-Brahmin castes in schools in form of teachers, because this was the beginning of colonial rule, and colonial educational institutions were established in Western India. But the first ones to take advantage of this education were basically the Brahmins, who already possessed literacy skills because of their caste status, because of their social status. And so most of the teachers in these school, in even in governmental schools, even in colonial schools or other educational institutions, were Brahmins. And Phule thinks that they were very hesitant to teach to non-Brahmin students, and they discriminated against them. They asked them to work in their households rather than imparting them education. Secondly, he was very critical of Brahmins who occupied important positions, not just important positions in colonial administration. So he believes that colonial state was actually uh, just and egalitarian, and if colonial state comes to know about the plight of Shudras and Atishudras, that is the lower castes and the Dalits, uh, it will be actually good for the welfare of these communities. However, he thinks that since Brahmins occupy the positions in administrations, they don't allow the Shudra and Atishudra masses to reach to the colonial masters. So that was his second point of criticism. And thirdly, he was critical of Brahmins who acted as priests. Uh, sorry. Uh, Ram Mohan Roy in Eastern India was also criticizing the role of the priests or Brahmins as mediators between God and the people. We know that it was also an important feature of Protestant movement in Europe. So what is common in all these three is that Ram Mohan, Phule, or Protestant movement in Europe, they all were criticizing the mediation, the role that priests or clergy played in mediating between God and the people, which means they did not allow people to access the God directly. Uh, the language of the scriptures also had a role in all these three instances. Protestant movement uh, urged for translation of Bible in European vernacular languages so that common people can also read and interpret Bible. Excuse me. Similarly, we know that Rammohn Roy also translated Upanishads in Bengali, Hindi, and English, I think. So, because like Sanskrit was a language which was not commonly understood by all. So, the point that I'm trying to make is that in all these instances, priests or clergy were important because common people couldn't understand the language of the scriptures. And it is this hegemony of knowledge that all of these people are challenging, people or movements are challenging. So Phule challenged the monopoly of the Brahmins as priests and argued that this mediation is not needed at all. In a later period in non-Brahmin movement, when Shahu Maharaj becomes the leader of this particular movement, which was started by Phule, he established a college for training of non-Brahmin priests. However, for Phule, no priest was required, not even non-Brahmin priest. Secondly, Phule was in favor of language of the people being the language of the religion. And so he doesn't really translate anything unlike what we see in Protestant movement and Ram Mohan Roy, because he doesn't think that Brahminical scriptures were worthwhile, were supposed to be or were to be read by non-Brahmins. However, he writes his own texts and certain texts about religion in Marathi, which was the language of common people around him. So I was saying that like one important aspect of Phule's thought is critique of Brahminism and Brahmins who occupied the positions in administration, educational institutions, and as priests. Second important feature of Phule's thought is subversion of Aryan theory. The theory that Aryans came from somewhere to India or invaded India uh, was quite popular at that time across regions, not just in India, but European scholars also upheld this. Basically, race, the concept of race, purity of race, was so dominant in the academic as well as popular discourse at that time that it's not surprising that Indian people also almost jumped upon this idea of race. Tilak, who was mostly the contemporary of Phule, is also fascinated by this theory of Aryan. Is also fascinated by Aryan theory, and he also tries, like Tilak and other nationalists, also try to use this theory for advocating their own agenda. Tilak, for example, said that Arctic was the home of Vedas, and Aryans migrated to India from Vedas. So nationalists in India were using the Aryan theory to establish supremacy of Indians vis-a-vis colonial masters. So the implicit argument here was that we also belong to the same race as our colonial masters, because this Aryan theory said that forefathers of Aryans stayed together somewhere near Caucasus mountain or near I mean, somewhere at some point of time, and one branch migrated to Europe, and another branch migrated to India through Iran. Uh, Now, Phule uses this particular theory, but in a very subversive way. He reinterprets this theory and shows that Aryans were the outsiders. In Phule's writings, the terms Aryans are used is the term Aryan is used in synonymous with the term Iranian and Brahmin. So according to Phule, Brahmins were the Iranians, were the Aryans who migrated to India from outside. They were the outsiders. And he thinks that all non-Brahmins were the indigenous inhabitants of this land. They were the masters of the land. They were the masters of kshetra, that is territory or land here, and that's why the term kshatriya. Uh, and so Phule is claiming that Aryans came from outside. They invaded the Indian territory. They di- I shouldn't use the term India here because it is not clear whether Phule is talking about India or just Western India. Uh, he's just saying that Aryans came from outside, enslaved the indigenous people here, and to sustain their hegemony, they created caste system and various scriptures. So it is through this caste system and Brahminical scriptures and religious practices that the hegemony of Brahmins or Aryans could be sustained. Uh, Phule was also concerned about the condition of peasants. And it is now that we have started talking about intersectionality, how class, gender, and caste intersect with each other, and how multiple exploitations and multiple identities work in connection to each other. Phule obviously, I mean, for Phule, the terms like intersectionality are all obviously not available. However, interestingly, he in a way talks about this intersectionality of class and caste, and he's talking a lot about plight of the peasants, and he's also addressing colonial state regarding how they can work for the welfare of the peasants, because he identifies peasants with the low castes. Uh, and so uh, religious exploitation by Brahmins also manifests in his writings as a kind of economic exploitation. He shows how priests deceive poor peasants who are illiterate, who do not know much, and how they are scared about what is going to happen in their future. And so, to secure their future, how they fall in the Brahminical trap and end up spending on performance of various rites and rituals where they have to pay dakshina or some kind of alms or donations to Brahmins. So what I'm trying to say is that like the Brahminical supremacy, especially in the religious sphere, is also a kind of economic supremacy in his writings. As we know, as Professor Basu also mentioned in the beginning, Phule was the first Indian to open a girls' school in modern India. So a lot of important aspect of his thought are regarding what we now call as gender question. Uh, but for now, I'm not going to speak on that because that will be a little divergent. One last point about Phule's thought in general is his take on nation. Uh, Phule passed away in 1890. And as we know, Indian National Congress was established in 1885. So he saw emergence of nationalist movement in a brief manner. But before Indian National Congress was established, there were other political organizations that were being established in various parts of India. In Pune, for example, there was an organization called as Pune Sarvajanik Sabha. Phule thought that these political organizations were uh, led by not just led by Brahmins but also represent interests of Brahmins, and so he was not really interested in getting involved into the nationalist politics because he did not think that nationalists were in any manner representing the interests of Shudras and Atishudras. In fact, he questions the very concept of nation and says that unless we are all equal, unless we get rid of caste system, we cannot talk about nation, because nation is about unity, and without equality, talking about unity is fruitless. Now I turn to the main theme of this talk, and that is quest for egalitarian religion. Uh, Phule and his associates established Satyashodhak Samaj, the religion that they all, or let's say dharma, that they all advocated through Satyashodhak Samaj was Sarvajanik Satya Dharma. Uh, we all are familiar with the term Sarvajanin, like Sarvajanin Sharada Utsav or like Durga Puja. So the Marathi term Sarvajanik is, I mean, has the same meaning as Sarvajanin in Bangla. So Sarvajanik is public, of the people, and Satya Dharma is a religion of, or let's say faith based on truth. Though the term dharma has been used in in this particular nomenclature, it is very different from established religious institution. I mean, it's not a like institutionalized religion as such. In fact, Phule said that Sarvajanik Satya Dharma, let's say it was a path for him. This path was open to people belonging to all religious communities, and he was also inviting Brahmins to join it. So, though the term religion is used here, it was for him a path or quest for truth. This truth is not already found, and that's why the term Satya Shodhak, the quest for truth, it's still going on. Now, what was this Sarvajanik Satya Dharma? Why was it about? I mean, why are we calling it, or why is he calling it as Sarvajanik? And like, what is Satya or true about it? Uh, According to Phule, the Brahminical scriptures uh, gave a kind of, uh, if I mean, may use the word false consciousness. Of course, this is a Marxist terminology which is not like available to Phule, but it is a similar argument that Phule is making, that Brahmins know what is truth. Brahmins know that you cannot achieve liberation by just worshipping deities and celebrating their festivals, but it is for their gain that Brahmins are propagating these religious festivals, various rites and rituals and ceremonies. And interestingly, it is also the same argument which is made by Ram Mohan Roy. Ram Mohan Roy is also talking about this kind of deceit that that is being done by Brahmins. So both Phule and Ram Mohan were saying that Brahmins actually know that the real religion does not lie in performance of rituals, but they deceive the masses, they cheat the masses, and it is against this kind of falsity that uh, Phule's truth or Phule's Satya Dharma can be posited. Uh, Phule rejected idol worship. He makes fun of Brahminical deities. For example, there is a verse or a kind of poem written by Phule where he's mocking Ganesha as a deity. He's laughing at it. And he is using a little crude language to make fun of these Brahminical deities. Though Phule rejected idol worship and these specific or particular Brahminical deities, he was not against the concept of God. Uh, he believed in monotheism, which he probably borrowed from Islam as well as Christianity, because he seems to be influenced by both these traditions. So, though he rejected idol worship, he believed in the concept of God, he believed in monotheism. However, to describe God, he uses a very peculiar term, and that is nirmik. Nirmik means one who creates. So his idea of religion, his idea of God is the one who creates the universe, the creator of the universe. And his argument is that all human beings, all men and women, are equal because they are created by one and the same God. In the terms of political science, modern political science, we can call this as the concept of foundational equality. We all are equal because we all are humans. Uh, Phule is claiming, or Phule is arguing, that we all are equal because we all are humans created by one and the same God. Uh, uh, yeah, so I was talking about the concept of nirmik. Now, why is this particular thing important? Because this seems to be a very common and simple conception. We have to juxtapose this against the conception of God and creation of various varnas in Purusha Sukta. Purusha Sukta is an example, but in Brahminical tradition, it is believed, which is of course, Purusha Sukta is one example, but then there is Bhagavad Gita and other texts which claim that four varnas were born from four limbs of Brahma. Brahmins were born from head, Kshatriyas from arms, and so on. So now, if we look at this conception of Purusha, great, I don't know how to translate it, but this is the conception which is there in the Brahminical tradition, that people belonging to various castes or various varnas, to be particular, were born from various limbs of Purusha. And it is against this that Phule is saying that no, we are not born from different organs of great Purusha. We all are created by one and the same God, and that is why we are equal. So this is one important aspect of what I am calling as egalitarian religion propagated by Phule. Uh, Secondly, Phule creates heroes for people. As I said, he rejected the concept of deities. He does not think that deities like Ganesha, Vishnu, Brahma were to be worshipped. Now, if we are asking people to stop worshipping certain deities, we also have to give them certain alternative. Fully, it's giving this alternative to people, not in form of religious deities, but in form of social and historical heroes. Uh, in Maharashtra, there are, today also, there are certain deities like Masoba, Khandoba. Khandoba, for example, is still an important deity who is worshipped by significant number of people. Now, these are very local, regional, and also to some extent low caste deities. We can compare these deities with Monasha and Tara and these goddesses in Eastern India. So these are not really Brahminical deities. One may still call them as Hindu deities. They still fall in that fold, but they are definitely not Brahminical deities like Rama and Krishna and I won't say Shiva, because Shiva has complex origin and evolution. So Phule takes these words, Khandoba and Masoba, and claims that he plays with these words and claims that these were not deities, these were important historical figures, and for something that they did good, they were venerated or worshipped by people. So, for example, he's saying that Khandoba, the term Khandoba must have come from the term Khanda, which means maybe a province or a division of territory, maybe district or something like that. And Phule thinks that there must be some good administrator, some good administrative officer ruling a particular Khanda or a district or a administrative unit. And since he worked well for the people, he worked for the welfare of the people, people must have started celebrating him as a hero, and that's how he turned into a deity. So he had similar kind of interpretations and argument for other deities, other regional or local deities that were worshipped by people at that time. However, he's taking the divinity from these deities and making them as historical social heroes. Bali is another hero or exemplar that Phule is creating in this process. So it is very interesting how he comes up with this idea of Bali. There are certain social religious practices in Maharashtra, some of them exist even today. And he observed that Bali is a deity which is worshipped by non Brahmins but not by Brahmins. In fact, Bali was a king who was who is worshipped by the peasants, and Vaman, who is considered as an incarnation or avatar of Vishnu, killed King Bali. And King Bali, even in Brahminical scriptures, was famous for his liberal kind of attitude, where he was famous for donation, like Karna was famous for his donations. And so, this King Bali is celebrated in popular culture. He was considered as the king of peasants, king who worked for the welfare of peasants. And so in a way Phule is taking this I mean he's not a very significant deity. Khandoba, on the other hand, as I said, was a significant deity. Bali was not a deity. He was considered as a king in legends, and Phule makes him important social hero or historical figure. Shivaji is another hero that Phule is giving to the masses. Now, when we talk about Shivaji, we know that in colonial times and even today, the icon or symbol of Shivaji is used in various ways. Today, Shivaji has become icon of Marathi identity. He has become icon of Hindu identity. Phule is celebrating Shivaji not because of his defeat of Muslim rulers, etc., etc., but he thinks that Shivaji was the king of peasants. He worked for the welfare of the low castes and peasants, and that is why, and that is how he celebrates Shivaji. So, at the same time, different interpretations of Shivaji are available by different people, and Phule is giving very specific interpretation where Hindutva and Maratha identity of Shivaji are totally absent. Apart from these deities turned historical heroes, Shivaji, Prophet Muhammad, and Jesus, the term used in Marathi is Yeshu, are also considered as important historical heroes in Phule's narratives. Probably because they gave a way for liberation of masses. It is not very clear in Phule's writings why he is celebrating these two figures, but we can only infer that maybe because these two religious traditions gave some way to people, especially the downtrodden people, to get away from or to liberate from the clutches of Brahminism. And he's comparing these two with King Bali. So this is another aspect of his his quest for egalitarian religion. Thirdly, I would like to talk about uh, alternative rituals and ceremonies that Phule propagates. As I mentioned in the beginning, Sarvajanik Satyadharma Pustak, the English title of which is The Book of True Faith, it's the last work by Phule. Apart from this work, he also wrote another text called as Satyashodhak Samajokta Mangalashtaka Saha Sarva Puja Vidhi. So I'm not translating the whole title. Basically, this is the text which describes various rites or rituals along with certain Marathi verses which were propagated by Satyashodhak Samaj. Both these books, along with all other works of Phule, is written in Marathi. And I'm again and again saying this, that he wrote in Marathi uh, because for him it is very important to write in the language of people. And it's not just the contemporary Marathi that he is using. His usage of language contemporaries who were basically the Brahmins. And so the way in which he write, the meters that he used, his grammar, everything was criticized. His language, his linguistic usages were criticized by his contemporary uh, literary scholars. But he made it a point to write in the language of people, which was very crude, which was very different from Brahminical language of his contemporary times. As I said, in these two books, Sarvajanik Satyadharma Pustak and another book that I talked about, Phule writes certain rituals. So he's propagating some alternative rituals in place of Brahminical rituals and ceremonies. These rituals were not invented by him as such. In some way or the other, they were already part of the non-Brahmin culture. The rituals or rites written by Phule in this book are instances showing how religious ceremonies can be conducted by the non-Brahmins in a more egalitarian way, uh, avoiding uh, avoiding and like officiation of priests, or let's say avoiding performance of these rituals by priests, and doing away with Brahminical practices of worship. In fact, Phule says that uh, the non-Brahmins should follow their deshachar and kulachar, that is the practices that are prevalent or that are current in their desh, in their region, and in their kul, in their family. So certain regional and familial customs which were already existing were to be followed by the people. However, as Gail Ombet also points out, Phule judges these traditions and customs in terms of what Ombet calls as two ruthlessly applied values, that is rationality and equality, and stamps out those parts which do not qualify this test. So to summarize what I was saying, that the rituals, alternative ritualistic practices propagated by Satyashodhak Samaj and Phule were not invented by him. They were already part of non-Brahmin traditions and culture, but Phule also applies the test of rationality and equality to these already existing customs and adopts or propagates only those customs which pass this test. Uh, sorry. Omvet further argues that Phule does not take a standpoint from outside the value tradition, outside the society, but he does take a stand outside the dominant cultural system, that is Brahminical system, that existed during this time. Now, rather than talking about in abstractly talking about the rituals propagated by Phule, I would like to read out a passage, a translation of a passage from this particular, from one of the texts by Phule. I'm reading. After a barber performs the rite of groom's tonsure in early morning, groom's sisters should apply fragrant powder and oil to the groom and bathe him. Then he should go to the grounds. There, on a site fixed previously, the groom should worship the creator, the Nirmik, that is Nirmik, as well as Masoba, offering these deities uh, pan, betel leaf rolls, and dry fruits. In the groom's pandal, a square should be formed with grains on a cloth on which the groom should sit. 5 married women should rub haldi to him and apply kumkum to his forehead. When he is dressed up, a wreath of flowers should be tied on his headgear. He should be adorned with flowers. A dagger should be given in his hand. Everyone should bless him to avoid blast of the evil. So we can see that these are very common wedding customs, that groom should offer betel leaves to gods. Women should apply, and married women, which is like little paradoxical considering the way in which Phule treats women otherwise. Yeah, so I was saying that these are very common wedding customs or wedding rituals that Phule is talking about. However, what is more like interesting or peculiar here is that apart from these customs, Phule is saying that instead of giving donation or alms, that is dakshina, to Brahmins, the donations should be given to the physically challenged persons, to children who do not have parents, and to students from lower castes and Dalits as their scholarship. Similarly, he says that when housewarming ceremony is done, which in Marathi is called as Vastu Shanta. So he's saying that at Vastu Shanti, that is a housewarming ceremony, instead of giving feast to Brahmins, uh, the feast should be given to laborers, to workers who actually built the house. Or at various occasions, he's saying that instead of spending money on rituals, instead of spending money on priests, that money should be used for the scholarships to students from lower castes. And this was not just in his thought. If we see the reports of Satyashodhak Samaj, we know that some members of Satyashodhak Samaj actually stopped the practice of arranging feast for Brahmins at Ganesh festival, Ganesh Puja, and spent that money on feeding and gifting clothes to physically challenged people from belonging to all castes. Another member who used to spend lavishly on Brahmins feasts and feasts at Diwali, cut down his expenditure and instituted a gold medal to encourage education of the education of the children of members of Satyachodhak Samaj. Uh, as I said in the beginning, Phule strongly disapproves the role of Brahmins as priests or intermediary between God and individuals. And so, one very important feature of ceremonies propagated by Phule and Satyashodhak Samaj was to dispense with the Brahmin priests at all. This was actually the basic action program of Satyashodhak Samaj. They supported numerous hundreds of marriage ceremonies which took place without the officiating or without the priest, Brahmin priests, or any other priests. So now then the emphasis was on the performance of these rites by the people themselves. So at the time of marriage, this particular ceremony is written down by Phule in one of the texts. He's saying that there will be no priest, and so there will be some verses which were to be sung by the bride, some verses which were to be sung by the groom, and some verses or some poems, some stanzas of the poem were to be sung by the people who attended that marriage. And these poems were not about how God, there was obviously religious aspects to it, but these songs which were to be sung at the time of marriage ceremony by bride and the groom were the exchange of oaths or vows between bride and groom. And these exchange of vows or oaths included the promise of equal treatment. And so marriage ceremony doesn't remain a religious ceremony, which otherwise was the case. It becomes a social ceremony where bride and groom promise each other that they will treat each other equally in their life. Again, the report of Satyashodak Samaj says that in order to eradicate evil customs and free people from Brahminical, okay, I'm skipping this part. The Satyashodak Samaj report gives detailed account of some weddings which happened according to these rites or these procedures laid down by Phule. And at some times, at some occasions, they had to give police protection because the contemporary society, especially Brahmins, were very, very furious. And so they tried to stop these practices. Some members of the Satyashodak Samaj also stopped the practice of worshipping Brahmins on the festival of Ganesh Chaturthi, Hartalika, and Rishi Panchami, some festivals that are celebrated in Maharashtra. So I'm skipping some part, and now I'm coming to the concluding part. I think I have given some examples or of some instances of how Phule and Satyashodak Samaj tried to offer some kind of alternative religious practices. And as I said in the beginning, though I'm using the word religion, these are also social practices, or these are social ceremonies rather than typical religious ceremonies. Now, question is that, but why do we need it? Can't we then have a society or culture where none of these things are there? Rather than making my argument, I would like to read out translation from a Dalit autobiography written by Urmila Pawar. The name of this autobiography is Aidan. It is written in Marathi, but it is also available in English translation. And in this particular text, the author is talking about the transformation in Dalit lives after the conversion to Buddhism. We know that towards the end of the life, Ambedkar converted into Buddhism along with number of his followers. And very soon after the conversion, Ambedkar passed away. So there was a lot of confusion. There was a little sense of directionlessness in the society when this happened. That people had got converted into Buddhism, they had thrown away Hindu idols or statues in river. Not really thrown away, they had done the visarjan of these deities into rivers, and they still did not know what would take place of these, like how to replace these things, what to now keep in, let's say, Thakur Ghar. And so uh, not Daya Pawar, sorry, Urmila Pawar in this particular autobiography is describing that the daily Hindu prayers stopped, and Dalit activists went from door to door to teach people Buddha Vandana, which was supposed to replace Hindu prayers. But there is one particular incident of marriage that she narrates in this autobiography, and that is the incident that I want to read out. This was the first Buddhist marriage in their family in that particular region. So people had no idea about how to conduct a marriage without Hindu ceremonies or without Brahminical ceremonies. So I'm reading out. Pawar writes, "We were very keen to see the new rites by which the marriage would be performed. There would be no haldi ceremony where the bride and groom were rubbed with turmeric before before their baths, and the village women were forbidden to sing usual marriage songs. So they were quite upset. They kept dropping in to see the kind of preparations that were on. Some of these were just like traditional marriages, but the table and two chairs arranged in the courtyard were certainly new. And table and chairs were not just two pieces of furniture. Uh, they represented a kind of colonial modernity. Using table and chair was not still very common among people. It was still considered as a sahebi kind of thing. I'm again reading out from the autobiography. Finally, one old woman, quite mystified, asked, "Why this table and chairs? Is the school teacher coming to perform the marriage?" Uh, the author also gives a meticulous description of all the rituals performed by a white robed Buddhist priest, including offering flowers to Buddha, lighting candles and incense sticks, recital of Panchashil and Trisharan, exchange of rings and garlands by the couple, 22 oaths that they repeated after the priest, and priest's insistence on a Mangal Sutra made of white beads to be given to the bride, as opposed to the traditional black Mangal Sutra, which is considered as the symbol of marital status in Maharashtra. And she says that the relatives could not produce the Mangal Sutra with white beads. It was just not available, but the Buddhist priests emphasized on that. So this is just an example of what would happen or what happens when a particular cultural system, the traditional one, which is there for a long time, it's suddenly to be discarded. There is a lot of anxiousness, there is some hesitance, there is some curiosity also, but uh, there is also a void or vacuum that needs to be filled. And so both Ambedkar as well as Phule, I would say, that understood that uh, you cannot just create the vacuum, you also have to feed that, fill up that vacuum with something else. And through construction of these alternative socio-religious rituals, through construction of a particular conception of nirmik, through construction of alternative historical figures and exemplars, Phule is trying to fill up this void. And this alternative conception and practices, really like socio-religious practices, as I am again and again saying, are based on equality and rationality. So with this, I would like to end. It was a lit like I mean, it was not very structured talk, but thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers and to Professor Basu for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madhura Damle. Uh, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you for this in-depth review of what Phule wanted to do. We, in Bengal, we are very much familiar with the ideas of Ram Mohan Rai and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar as social reformers, and also ideas of Brahmo Samaj, Akhoy Kumar Datta, and uh, other people here, Keshav Chandra Sen, these people. We have heard the name and certain anecdotes about Phule. Sometimes his wife Savitri Bai Phule. She was a personality by herself, not simply a wife of a social reformer, Phule. Now, uh, certainly some comparisons come in mind between Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who was born in 1820, and uh, Jotirao Phule, who was born in 1827. And some difference of the context has been brilliantly summed up by Dr. Damle. The arrival of colonial modernity in Bengal and colonial modernity in Maharashtra. Maharashtra of that time and Bengal of that time. Phule, we have heard that we have heard from Dr. Damle how Phule fought against Brahminism, although he did not mention Hinduism, but he fought against Brahmanism. He did not attack the concept of God. He constructed the concept of Nirmik, probably Nirmik if I am not wrong. And we have also uh, come to know that Phule, at the age of 21, he and his wife, Savitri Bai Phule, set up the first girls' school. That is really, really to be appreciated. And also, I remember one incident that Phule, at that time, widows, particularly of the upper caste, often they were subjected to sexual harassment. Some became pregnant, and one widow wanted. She was not successful in abortion, and when the baby was born, she killed the baby, and it drew the attention of the British government, and she was punished. She was imprisoned. This moved Phule to a great extent, and Phule also set up a house, a shelter for pregnant widows, giving advertisement in bills, and his efforts for education. What we came to know from Dr. Damle, uh, Damle has an advantage. She herself is a Marathi scholar, but she is exposed to Bengali culture. She has long spent in North India, in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. So she is exposed to different kinds of cultures. She knows Sanskrit also. And so we can know some first-hand information and analysis from Madhura Damle. And Phule attacked Brahmanism, Phule attacked caste system, Phule glorified the Dalit and Shudra culture, their rights and rights of women, and particularly educational rights. And he took the help of the British government. That may be a little controversial because we know in case of Vidyasagar, during the Naxalite period, Vidyasagar's statue was beheaded, giving the argument that he helped the British army to take shelter in Sanskrit College during the 1857 revolt. But these things are not so simple. They should not be oversimplified. That we understand now. And a very critical evaluation should be made, because Dalit people were subjected to Brahminical or Peshwa oppression. And at that moment, the British liberal culture helped them. But on the other hand, one can argue that the Brahminical rule and the colonial rule were equally dangerous. Or one can argue that colonial rule was more dangerous than Brahminical rule. But on the other hand, one can say that Brahminical rule existed for thousands of years in India, just like patriarchy. So these debates are welcome, regarding Vidyasagar, regarding Phule, regarding Periyar, regarding Narayan, Narayan Sami, Narayan Guru. These things are there. And we know the debate in which the Professor Gopal Guru was involved. The question of Mahar revolt, the question of colonial rule, etc. These should be discussed, certainly. Madhura made a brilliant sum up. We are very grateful that she could find some time. Some other day we will be interested to know about Savitri Bai Phule, the most respected lady. One day, we know very little of her. Now, Prakash, if there are any questions, and at the end I have my questions. Please see. Prakash Chakraborty has asked a question. What was the main contributions of Jyotiba Phule as a social reformer?
Should I answer right now? Yeah. There were lots of contributions, so I won't say there was just one main contribution. There are some contributions in field of, let's say, women's education, but also education of Shudras and Atishudras, that is lower castes and Dalits. So he actually established a society for the education of Dalits, for the education of lower caste, for the education of girls. Also, he opened night schools so that the working class people can, and I mean, for us, night school is not a new concept, but considering that context, this is something really laudable. So there is a significant contribution of Phule in the field of education, including female education. And secondly, like the aspect that I talked about today, is another significant contribution is in the field of challenge to caste system. We know a lot about Dalit movement led by Ambedkar, but in some way the roots of that movement lie in non-Brahmin movement led by Phule. So I think these are two most important contributions of Phule as a social reformer in field of education and in field of challenge to the caste system.
Amit Kumar Ghosh. Amit Kumar Ghosh, he was a student of Presidency Pol Science, now in IDSK, PhD scholar. And the earlier person was Prakash Chakraborty. He is one of the main organizers of this Rashtrabigyan Charcha Kendra. He is a law student now.
Okay.
Anyway, Amit Kumar Ghosh asks, Ma'am, thank you for your insightful lecture. I have one question. Can you say Phule was influenced by Bhakti tradition? Or how can we locate the egalitarian path of Phule in Bhakti tradition?
Yeah, thank you, Amit, for this question. Uh, he was informed by the Bhakti tradition, but I wouldn't use the term influenced by it. There is one reference in his writings to a Kabir Panthi sadhu. So it seems that Phule was very well familiar with Kabir's works, and to some extent inspired by it. But Bhakti movement in Western India uh, was basically in form of worship or devotion of a particular deity called as Vitthal, and it is called as Varkari tradition. So Varkaris were the people who were devotees of Vitthal. This again, like very crucial god in Deccan region, not just in Maharashtra. And there is this tradition of Wari, that is pilgrimage. So people in once in a year, people walk down to the shrine of Vitthal, which is at a town called as Pandharpur. So Varkari tradition is one of the most important manifestation of Bhakti movement in Western India. It seems that Phule was not very comfortable with this particular tradition. He thinks Varkari tradition or devotion of Vittala as one form of Brahminism itself. He makes at some point of time he actually makes fun of it, uh, and so I would say he was definitely informed by Bhakti tradition and its egalitarianism. He was definitely aware of it. He was to some extent inspired by Kabir, but it is difficult to say that he was influenced by Bhakti tradition, which at that time, I mean, even today, Varkari tradition, which is the Bhakti tradition, like dominant Bhakti tradition in Maharashtra, he, I would say that he distanced himself from it.
Prakash Chakraborty asks, how did Jyotiba Phule influenced Ambedkar?
Uh, I haven't read entire literature by Ambedkar, uh, but so I wouldn't be like I will not be able to say exactly in which way he influenced Ambedkar, but definitely this anti-Brahminism stand or anti-caste stand that Phule is taking, this is definitely a big inspiration by Ambedkar, and Ambedkar also invokes Phule. Secondly, uh, I think what is common in both of them is the connections that caste system, or let's say complex interaction that caste system has with patriarchy. I think both of these leaders or scholar thinkers recognize that. Thirdly, the importance of education. Now, we cannot say that this is the aspect that Ambedkar is taking from Phule, but we know for sure that there are certain similarities between the arguments or theorization of both of these scholars, and we definitely know that Ambedkar was not just inspired but was also invoking Phule. I think they differ on, uh, rather than differ, I would say that Ambedkar also goes a step ahead. So Phule is still not talking about political organization of Dalits and lower castes. Political rights or constitutional and legal rights are still not very important for Phule, which become very important for Ambedkar. So that is something uh, there in Ambedkar's thought and activism, which is not there in Phule. But otherwise, in terms of challenge to caste system and Brahminism, in terms of importance to education as the most important means of liberation, I think there is a kind of similarity.
Samad Chisti Asrafi. He asks, why was Phule become a social reformer? Is it because he was born in a Shudra family?
Uh, that only partially explains why he is a social reformer. We can say that his own experience of being a Shudra uh, in must have played a role in him becoming a social reformer. But that's not all, because there were thousands of people who belong to uh, Shudra families and did not become social reformers. One of the major influences on Phule was work of Christian missionaries, especially the critique done by Christian missionaries of Brahminical scriptures and caste system in general. That was one major influence. Phule himself was studied in a Christian missionary school, so that was one influence. Another influence on Phule was uh, writings by various Western philosophers, including Thomas Paine. So Thomas Paine's work, right, Rights of Man, right, was a major influence on Phule. Thirdly, anti-slavery movement in the United States was also a source of inspiration for Phule. And we also have to grant certain agency to that person, because these things were influencing lots of people. So we can't say, like, we can't talk about cause and effect in social sciences, so we can't say that this is the reason why Phule became social reformer. But these are lots of influences, or these are inspirations uh, which can explain the stand that Phule is taking.
Next, Prakash, any more questions? Prakash? Prakash? Professor Tanveer Arshad from Department of Political Science, Presidency University. Thank you, Dr. Damle, for the enlightening lecture, and special thanks to Professor Basu for organizing the webinar. If I am allowed, I would like to know your take on the future of caste politics in present-day Bharat. Bharat within single quotes.
Thank you very much, Tanveer, for listening to this presentation. Uh, caste politics is a big uh, field, so I mean, I'm not sure what should I say, like what is my take on future of caste politics. Thing is that caste politics is going to stay. uh, since you are using the term Bharat, I would say that uh, Hindutva forces or right wing forces in general have used uh, I mean, their argument generally is caste system is bad actually. I mean, generally we think that Hinduism is about caste system. Hinduism and caste system are intrinsically related, and so Hindutva politics should represent that. And of course, Hindutva politics is about Brahminical hegemony or dominance in some way. However, if we look at the ideologues and works of Hindutva organizations, we actually see that they claim that caste system is not good. Why would they say that? Because, I mean, since for them Hindu unity is important, they in a way try to uh, downplay the caste the existence of caste and caste system and claim some kind of unity. However, the way in which caste system has become part of Indian politics, it is difficult for anyone, whether it's any kind of politics. It's very difficult that it will go away suddenly. As we know, Rajni Kothari's argument that there was a hope in the beginning that as modern political institutions come, the traditional caste system and these structures would go away. But they did not go away because modern political institutions do not work in vacuum. They work and use the existing social institutions like caste system. And so now caste system has become an intrinsic part of Indian politics. So whether it's Hindutva dominance in Indian politics or something else, caste politics unfortunately is going to stay.
Thank you, Madhura. Now, Professor Satyajit Dasgupta from University of Calcutta. He says, excellent presentation by an erudite scholar. What role would you assign to Phule's Western education in this entire social engineering of demolition of caste hierarchies in Indian society?
Thank you very much, Professor Dasgupta, for these remarks. I don't know whether to call Phule's education as Western education as such, because Phule did not study in a colonial educational institution. He of course studied in a missionary school, and he was acquainted with, to some extent, uh, Western knowledge systems and philosophies. But as I said, it is still the beginning of colonial rule in Western India. So the exposure to Western ideas and Western education is still limited at Phule's time. So I would say that yes, Western education in terms of missionary education definitely played an important role in Phule's demolition of caste hierarchies, his challenge to caste system. But as I said, that is just one part of it. That's not all.
Next, Santosh Kumar Pal has asked, how is Phule's interpretation of Aryan invasion acceptable?
It, it's not acceptable in the sense that uh, historically we do not know whether this is true or not. We do not know whether Aryans. Firstly, I would say that the very concept of Aryan, the very concept of race and racial theory is not accepted anymore in academic circles, or generally also. Scholars and academics have now shown that there is nothing like racial purity. The very concept of race has been challenged now. Secondly, uh, the Aryan invasion theory was based on certain linguistic theories uh, in India. So scholars like William Jones and then Max Muller coined the concept of Aryan language family, which basically included languages from India and Europe. So another term for this language family was Indo-European language family. And since the authors of the Vedas uh, called themselves as Aryans, the term Aryan was used to describe this particular language family, that is Indo-European language family. And later, this particular term Aryan was appropriated and was given a racial connotation. Now, scholars like Romila Thapar have argued that this was a slippage between speech or language and biology. What she means by this is that The fact that the languages spoken by Europeans and Indians were similar doesn't mean that ethnically or racially they were one and the same. And so I would say that Aryan, the very, like, forget about invasion. The very concept of Aryan race, and purity of Aryan race is not acceptable anymore. Now, if it is not acceptable, why should we talk about, and why should we talk in a celebratory way about Phule's subversion of Aryan theory? Historically, what Phule is saying, that Aryans came from Iran and they established Brahminic caste system here. We do not know whether it's historically true or not. But it is important because the political statement that Phule is making through this, it is the time when people in Indian people are saying colonial masters are to be, I mean, should go from this country because they are outsiders. And he is using this anti-outsider sentiments and saying that it is not just the colonial masters, but even the Brahmins are outsiders, and uh, the people from lower caste are actually the original inhabitants of India. So it is in this sense that this theory is to be talked about, not in the sense of its historical truth, because it may not be historically true, the way in which Pule talked about it.
Prakash Chakraborty asks, what was the role of Jyotiba Phule in upliftment of Dalit?
Phule uses the category of Atishudra, or I mean, this is the term that Phule is using for Dalits. Dalits, the term Dalit is coined in a later period. So whenever, like when I was talking today, I use the term Atishudra several times, from which I think answer to this question should be clear. That his role in upliftment of Dalits was to open educational institutions, and number of them, for them, to give them alternative religious practices. Uh, he not only criticized Brahmins, but he also criticized Shudras and Atishudras, and like in a little paternal manner, he also preached them how how they should behave and not behave. He talked about certain virtues like industriousness, that were to be adopted by lower castes and Dalits. So lots of things that I have been talking about today are not just about, I mean, are about his work regarding upliftment of Dalits.
Any other question, Prakash?
5 minutes.
Just one second distraction. I heartily welcome our uninvited guest, the little master Obhidhan, Madhura's son. Please stay here and attend. We will be very happy.
Hi.
Next question, Prakash. Prakash, is there any other question? At last, I have one question.
Sure.
Prakash? Okay, in the meantime, I put my question. Huh?
Yeah.
I already mentioned it a little bit. Actually, there are many forms of oppression in our society. There has been many. One is patriarchy, gender discrimination. Second is caste discrimination, caste oppression of Shudras and Dalits, and one is class exploitation, which is emphasized by the Marxists. I find that uh, Phule gave priority to caste oppression, and then also he gave emphasis on patriarchal oppression, gender discrimination, although not fully, but to an important degree. And thirdly, economic exploitation or poverty or class question, not in the Marxist way, but
Yeah.
he was aware of the poverty question
Yes.
of the peasants particularly and workers. Now, there are two others for me very important. One is the colonial exploitation at that time. That is the national oppression, national discrimination or national oppression, colonial oppression by the British rule. One. And the second one is the question of minorities. Today it is very much relevant, but at that time, maybe during Phule's time, the question of minorities, that is the Muslim minorities, Christian minorities, or tribal minorities, or linguistic minorities. There are different kinds of minorities. So, I would like to know, you see, Marx was born in 1818 and Phule was born in 1827. Now, was Phule anyway, did he anyway come across the socialistic literature of Marx or his predecessors? That is just query. So my question is, was he aware of national oppression, colonial rule, colonial exploitation, or he was so much engrossed with caste question, Dalit question, and Shudra question that he almost totally ignored the economic exploitation by and racist exploitation of the colonial masters? That is one, and the other is minority question. These two.
Yeah. Regarding colonial oppression, it's not that he's unaware, because by the time, towards the end of his life, these political organizations which are and people who are talking about colonial oppression they have already started functioning. So he must be aware about the nature of colonial state or nature of colonialism itself, but he doesn't really find it very problematic. In fact, he appeals again and again to Rani Bai, that is Queen Victoria, because he seems to have immense faith in the justice of British, like the concept of justice and liberty of the Britishers. So he thinks that colonial state is for the good of, it is going to be for the good of people. If we appeal to the Britishers, it will be really good for the welfare of the people. So it's not that, he is not aware of, or he doesn't understand. Of course, he must be aware of the problem of the colonialism itself. But as scholars like Rinku Lamba have argued, these early social reformers, again, not just Phule, but many of them could actually uh, separate state from colonialism. So very often they appeal to the state, or they try to take help or assistance of the state for the upliftment of the lower castes, and they did not really find a fact that this state was colonial state, very, very problematic. Also, because the nationalist movement that was emerging at that point of time uh, was, as I said in the lecture also, was representing interests of the zamindars, interest of the Brahmins, and so it is very obvious that he did not align with them. And as we know, even Indian Marxists were not very comfortable in aligning with Indian nationalist movement, though they were anti. I mean, capitalist. Imperialism is considered as the last stage of capitalism, and in spite of this kind of ideology, uh, they were not very sure whether to align with nationalist movement in India. So for similar reasons, Phule was not very comfortable, and he says that, like, we cannot talk about national unity if there is no equality in the society. So that must be the reason why he did not take an anti-colonial stand. Regarding question of minority, as I said, he's talking about 30 minutes. 5 more minutes. As I said, he's talking about Prophet Muhammad. He's talking about Jesus. I mean, he's celebrating them as heroes. However, the way in which the idea of religious minority is available to us is not available to Phule. It is only after the census that these people became so much aware about the numerical strength of various religious communities in India. And so, this very idea of religious minority, becomes available to people after census exercise. So obviously, Phule is not talking about Muslims as a religious minority or any other minority for that matter. Uh, but he seems to be influenced by Islamic conception of religion, especially Islamic monotheism, as well as Christian conception of monotheism, and several other aspects of Christianity. So there is certain syncretism which we also find in the thought of Ram Mohan. So some aspects of syncretism are there, but it is very obvious that there is nothing about minority in his thought.
Prakash.
Professor Satyajit Dasgupta, one more question.
Professor Satyajit Dasgupta asks, did you find any specific or tangential traces of class awareness in Phule's writings?
As I said, class comes in Phule's writing only through the category of peasants. So obviously it's not very explicit category of class as we find in Marxist theorization. That was something obviously not at all available to Phule, the Marxist category of class. The only way in which class comes is through the category of peasants. And peasants are not just described in terms of agriculturalists, but also in terms of their economic status, economic position. Another way in which class comes in Phule's work, and not so much in his thought, is workers' questions. Phule was located in Pune. However, Mumbai or Bombay was the city where textile mills had come into existence, and there was, a working class was emerging there. So Phule himself was not very much involved in workers' questions, But Phule's associates, like there was someone called as Narayan Meghaji Lokhande, who was an important associate of Phule. He was organizing these workers, and Phule supported his work. So these are two ways in which class appears in Phule's works and writings.
Prakash?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Very nice discussion today. সকলকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ এতক্ষণ ধরে আমাদের আলোচনাটি শোনার জন্য। আজকের আলোচনা আমরা এখানে শেষ করছি। সকলে ভালো থাকবেন, সুস্থ থাকবেন। সকলকে শুভরাত্রি। Good night, ma'am, and thank you, sir.
Thank you,
ma'am.
everybody. Special thanks to Dr. Madhura Damle for this brilliant lecture, and thanks to all audience.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you, the organizers and the audience. Good night.
Good night.